Yesterday, Stephen Miller was absolutely on fire. He was fantastic, as he always is, talking about the crime situation in the District of Columbia and what the president has done in an executive order removing cashless bail from certain circumstances if anybody's going to be getting federal funding for their police department or for their law enforcement. Stephen Miller was so good explaining the problem and so good revealing what's going on with DC law enforcement right now after Trump engineered the cooperation of federal law enforcement officials that the left is going absolutely bonkers over him. He knows exactly how to push all the right buttons, and boy, did he ever yesterday. We shall begin with Stephen Miller on Hannity last night, but we're going to get to a moment that Stephen Miller might turn into an incredibly lucrative and successful multi-million-dollar defamation lawsuit at the hands of CNN. We'll show you that in a sec, but first, here's Miller on Hannity.
President Trump has literally set the people of Washington, D.C. free. They're so happy now that they can just go out and live their lives, go to their favorite restaurant, go to their favorite bar, go to their favorite pool hall, go to their favorite park. You see moms taking kids out to parks they haven't been to in years because they know the police are there. They know that President Trump is there with his law enforcement to protect them. It's a thing of beauty, Sean. But I would say to the mayor of all these Democrat cities, like Chicago, what you are doing to your own citizens is evil. Subjecting your own citizens to this constant bloodbath and then rejoicing in it is evil. And you should praise God every single day that President Trump is in the White House.
I love this, and I think every Republican who holds elected office or is running for office needs to keep repeating this to push back against the lie that there is something untoward or inappropriate or fascist, authoritarian, or racist about demanding law enforcement is done in a proper, professional, and traditional way, whereupon laws are enforced and criminals are punished. That's all Republicans and most 80% of Americans want out of their law and order and law enforcement judicial system in their city or their state. If you break the law, you should be punished. The bad guy should be arrested and put away in jail. Protect the good guys. And when we hear all this pablum about, oh, you're being an authoritarian, and you're being a racist, and you're being this, and you're being this, and we got to get to the root cause of the problem, and there's not an wipe it all away by saying, shame on you. How dare you? Why do you want to victimize the people of your city? Why do you want to victimize the people of your state? Why are you so indifferent to the suffering of the people who live in the city that you're the mayor of, that you're supposed to be responsible for? And you couldn't care less about the death and destruction and sexual abuse and child abductions because you have some sort of pedestal you want to put yourself up on to sanctimoniously preen about social justice? How dare you? We need to take the moral high ground on this issue. If Donald Trump and his cabinet, including Stephen Miller, are guilty of anything, it's that they care too much about the people who are being victimized in these inner cities. Many before them have said, it's not my problem. I'm not going to win any, compassion prizes or international awards for making sure that the streets of DC are safe. No, I'll focus on some, problem in sub-Saharan Africa so that I can preen at the Nobel Prize Committee's beckoning. Instead, this administration is actually focusing on the plight here in our country. And much of that plight has to do with violent crime and the Democrats who run the cities that are indifferent to those victims. So we move from Hannity last night to earlier in the day. We showed you a little clip of this yesterday when President Trump signed that executive order that empowered the Justice Department to withhold federal funds to jurisdictions that have cashless bail. And then Stephen Miller, who's been cooperating with the White House and the Metropolitan Police Department in the District of Columbia for the new crime initiative, he took the floor. And just take a listen to what he revealed.
They've lost control of their place. Steve Miller, please say a few words.
Thank you, sir. So just to, first of all, follow up on what the Vice President said, no police officer working in the city can remember a time in their lives when there has been no murders. You can work at the police department for 20 years, 30 years, your whole life. We've checked the records. No one can even find a record of being murder-free for as long as we've been murder-free under President Trump's leadership. Additionally, and the President spoke about this before, we've uncovered, in the process of uncovering, a massive scandal in Washington, D.C. with the doctoring of crime stats. And the Department of Justice, under the Attorney General, is leading the effort to uncover this. But when we ultimately share the results, it will stun you. The extent to which, even though D.C. had the worst crime in America, honestly measured, it dramatically understated how bad it was. There's even accusations that murders and homicides were reported as accidents instead of murders. I mean, this is how severe the manipulation of the crime data has been in the city, and it will all be uncovered and it will all be brought to light. You know, I've had a chance to spend some time, as has everyone here, with the police officers in the city. Members of the public are going up to them and thanking them, just overflowing with gratitude, because for the first time in their lives, they can use the parks, they can walk on the streets. You have people who can walk freely at night without having to worry about being robbed or mugged. They're wearing their watches again. They're wearing jewelry again. They're carrying purses again. People had changed their whole lives in this city for fear of being murdered, mugged, and carjacked. It is a literal statement that President Trump has freed 700,000 people in this city who were living under the rule of criminals and thugs. And the last thing I'll say is that under the efforts of Terry, to my left and many here, what they found also is that the street criminals here in Washington, D.C. were doing business directly with the transnational criminal cartels, the foreign terrorist organizations. So not only was the city being run by these criminal thugs, but they were working with some of the most dangerous terrorist organizations on the planet to traffic weapons and drugs into this city. And what we are uncovering every day is shocking to us, and we look forward to sharing all the results with you. But President Trump, your leadership has uncovered some of the great public safety scandals of our life, and now because of you, people are safe and free for the first time ever in this city.
Thank you very much, Steve. You know, in Los Angeles,
That is a stunning revelation. All of that were stunning revelations. The international criminal cartels dealing directly with the criminals in Washington, D.C. But did you catch it? And it's true, by the way, I checked right before we went live today at noon. We are now 13 days in without a homicide in Washington, D.C. in the middle of August. Unheard of. Absolutely unheard of. We were averaging, I think I gave you the quote the other day, 3 murders a week in Washington, D.C., right up until this happened with President Trump on August 12th. 3 murders a week, and now we've gone almost 2 weeks with 0 murders. But did you catch this one moment where he revealed that the criminal stats in Washington, D.C. were doctored to such an extent that they were characterizing a murder as an accident? I want you to watch J.D. Vance interact with Attorney General Bondi at that moment, because J.D. Vance is just such a normie. And watch what he does when he hears that.
Stated how bad it was. There's even accusations that murders and homicides were reported as accidents instead of murders. I mean, this is how severe the manipulation of the crime data has been in this city. And
did you see that? He looks at he says, he like shakes his head, he can't believe it, and then he turns to Pam Bondi. Did you hear what he was? He goes, "That's crazy." Did you catch that?
I mean, this is how severe the manipulation of the crime data has been in this city.
That's crazy. Pam Bondi's like, "I know, JD, chill out. We got this." I love that. It's just such a normal, chatty kind of dude thing to do. All right, so that's Stephen Miller laying out exactly what was going on Hannity last night, at the Oval Office yesterday. Absolutely insane. And again, his compassion is for the victims. His compassion are for the innocent people who are being victimized and terrorized, who can't walk down the street with their purses or wearing a watch or jewelry because they're afraid they're going to be victimized, right? So now let's turn to CNN's reaction. Because in this whole scenario, with the theft and the violence and the raping and the sexual predators and the murder, who's the bad guy? Who's the evil one? Who's the monster? Stephen Miller.
Really quickly, Abby, because anytime that we play something from Stephen Miller, it would be journalistic integrity to point out that he is a white supremacist and he is the brainchild behind this policy. That's not my opinion. That's actual facts. And for him to purport lies from the Oval Office as a white supremacist,
I don't know.
it should be pointed out. Look,
Aspersion.
it's reporting. Washington Wall Street Journal's own reporting.
I want to address.
So what you just witnessed, I know a lot of people are like, I can't believe CNN let them do it. That's libel. That's libel. She can't say that. That's libel. You can't, like, that's horrible. That's lie. Let me just set the record straight. Forgive me for having to be the fact checker here, but you're wrong. That is not libel. Libel is when you defame somebody with a written word. That's slander. But it's defamation nonetheless. What you just witnessed was a classic textbook. And when I say textbook, I mean textbook for law school example of knowing, premeditated, with an absence of malice. No, I'm sorry, with a preponderance of malice, defamation. Stephen Miller could be a very, very, very wealthy man, and all of his wealth could come from that young lady, Tiffany Cross, I believe her name is, and CNN's parent company, Warner Discovery. I hope he's talking to some good defamation lawyers, because we need to break down just how bad this was, what she just said. We're gonna Zapruder film this clip so you can see just how insane and defamatory, like dotting the I's and crossing the T's when it comes to defamation law, this statement was.
Really quickly, Abby, because anytime that we play something from Stephen Miller, it would be journalistic integrity to.
So first she frames what she's about to say by couching it in journalistic integrity. So the next statement, she is saying as a journalist on behalf of CNN, because she said we, and she is saying that what she's about to proclaim is being proclaimed for the sake of journalistic integrity. So, I mean, I can't overstate the fact that she has amped this up to 11 on a scale of 1 to 10 about how incredibly defamatory this is and how wide open they have left CNN for the ugliest damn lawsuit. They're going to have to change CNN to the Stephen Miller Network. That's how bad this is going to be if Miller wants to push it. So first, what she's about to say is for journalistic integrity. We. So she's taking ownership of CNN now as part. She might not even be on the payroll, but the statement was allowed to be made within the framework that she is part of CNN. We need to do this for journalistic integrity. Okay, so what do we have to say there, Tiffany Cross?
Point out that he is a white supremacist and he is the brainchild behind this policy. That's not my opinion. That's actual fact.
Now, what's most remarkable about this is that if she had said he is a white supremacist and then said, that's my opinion, they'd still be in trouble, by the way. Everybody thinks it's like, well, if you just say it's my opinion, you can say whatever the hell you want. Not really. Not really. Not if it's provable. Not if you can't show that you've done any sort of due diligence to know if your opinion is informed or not or anything like that. If it's an open question, if it's a bit of a toss-up, theoretically, you may have questions about whether Brigitte Macron is a man or a woman or not, for instance. You can offer your opinion on that. But she went out of her way to say, this isn't my opinion. This is a fact. And oh, by the way, I'm delivering that fact for the sake of CNN's journalistic integrity. My Lord, I'll take the case, Stephen. I'll be your lawyer. And I don't have a law degree. And look, I love the guy sitting next to her is a lawyer. And he's like, honey, that is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Let's move, though, because that is probably the worst thing that you saw yesterday in reaction to all these things. But over on MSNBC, It wasn't quite as insane, but with Yamiche Alcindor, it gets pretty close to being bad. Take a look.
Let's get right to NBC News White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor. Yamiche, what do we know about today's executive orders, and are they actually enforceable?
Well, that's a good question, Anna. We know that there are 2 executive orders that the president is going to be signing related specifically to cashless bail. The first is specifically on D.C. He's going to be ordering that D.C. end its cashless bail system that was put into place in 1992. That means that judges in the city here, they determine whether or not a person is a flight risk or poses a threat to society, but there is no money attached to a person's freedom, meaning that if some person is essentially said, okay, yes, you are somebody who can go home, they don't end up having to give $10,000, $20,000 in order to secure their release. That being said, the president is essentially going to be directing the city to end it. He can't change D.C. law by executive order, but what he's going to try to do is withhold federal funds to the city. And he's also going to be trying to maybe pull back any sort of federal approvals for projects in Washington, D.C. The second executive order actually is even more expansive. It targets nationwide cashless bail systems. And in that case, it could look at cities and states like Illinois, which has a cashless bail system. And there, the president is asking his officials and aides to make a list of jurisdictions, cities, and states that have cashless bail systems, and to then look at policies as well as programs that the federal government could defund in order to try to also push them to end their cashless bail policies, Anna.
So why the focus on cashless bail?
It's a good question. The president is essentially saying that cashless bail systems are dangerous and allow people who are violent, who are flight risks to be out on the street, and that it makes society safer by having a cash bail system where someone has to actually put up money, or their family and friends have to put up money in order to say, yes, they will come back to the court system. Now, I've been talking to a number of officials who say that simply isn't true. They're pointing to studies that show that actually cashless bail, it doesn't do anything other than really target low-income people. So people who have the money to get out of prison will be able to do that. But then poor, low-income Americans, even if they aren't a flight risk or aren't any more dangerous than those people with the money, that they are being hurt by the system.
There you go. All right. So did you catch that? I want to make sure that you caught that, because it's just beautiful left-wing pablum talking points that don't stand up to reason or logic. Now, one thing that she was saying over and over again, which is just untrue, is that the reason that criminals are asked to post bail is if a judge thinks that they're a flight risk. That's partially true, but she's leaving in another part. If they're accused of a heinous crime, and there is any suspicion that they could actually commit a similar heinous crime again, and inflict more violence or criminal activity on society, well, you set a high cash bail to keep them incarcerated so that they can't be a danger to society. It's funny how she left that part out. But at the very end there, she said all this, and she said she talked to experts. Well, you always talk to experts, see. This is how they always frame their own opinion and their own political agenda, by talking to experts. Notice how she doesn't talk to any experts and relay any of their ideas about how cashless bail has actually increased violent crime in cities ever since it's been instituted back in 2019 and 2020. Those experts she doesn't talk to, but she did talk to experts that told her that this just punishes poor people. And well, that's just a lie, you see. That's just false. I'm sorry for having to fact check MSNBC, but it's on the face of it untrue and a lie, and I can prove it to you. There are millions and millions and millions and millions of poor people living in Democrat-run cities that are crime-infested, that are living below the poverty line, who will never have to worry about the problem of cashless bail. Cashless bail will never affect them at all, because they didn't break the law. So Yamiche Alcindor of PBS and of MSNBC, if I may just correct the record, cashless bail does not punish poor people. It punishes poor criminals. And let's not forget that very important point.